The universe of the amazing digital circus ended up giving a lot of explanations, but at the same time it was left very open, with several stories that weren't really clarified and also many points of the main story that were left completely unanswered. And a lot of people were upset about that and complained, with good reason. I imagine this has much more to do with the creator of Digital Circus. That's because at the premiere of the Digital Circus movie, she said that this is the end of a story from Digital Circus, but not the end of Digital Circus itself. Bizarre and enigmatic. I've already said what I think about that. I think they're doing it on purpose so they can leave it open for more sequels. If they make a sequel, it will focus on these points about them, which I'll discuss now. So go ahead and leave a like, say hi in the comments, and let me know if you want a sequel to Circo Digital, because everything suggests that's going to happen. Man, the craziest thing is that Circo Digital is basically based on everything that was explored in the pilot's concept, with a lot of mysteries that never really went anywhere. An example of this is the group of humans who were inside Circo Digital from the very beginning. Except for the group that showed up with Cain back at the beginning with his wife and everything, we barely saw anything. Kingo saw it, we understand that they could have worked together, but there was also his wife, and it's not clear if she worked directly with him. All of them faded into the background, and there were others too, who also ended up without any kind of spotlight. In the end, we see here a mural with all the original members and also the others, but some are missing. The other clown, the Cyclops, the creature that looks like it's inside an oyster, and this little green creature. It's kind of weird that when they made that mural, like they left those four out on purpose, you know? It's like they were practically not even, important to the story. They don't have a well-told story. They don't even have a name. They're not even mentioned in flashbacks. Which shows that, the people who stay inside the digital circus have their memories completely wiped out. Even Hagata was a character who ended up forgetting about the other characters. I think that, the digital circus could evolve to have stories with these characters, you know? There are loose ends here for everyone who ended up disappearing even before the story we saw. The original circus crew who were there with Kingo, or the group of former CIA employees who woke up inside the digital circus. Would they have interesting stories? For sure. But a flashback story with them would be a pretty sad story. However, they could explore a bit of the memories they have from the CIA, which would be really good since we know that the circus members, they know and remember parts of their minds, but not exactly all the details. One of the saddest things about the digital circus is Scratch, who was the first to enter and the first to be abstracted. We understand that he was the guy who created the second AI, the AI that replaced and basically destroyed Cain's attention, and he was such an advanced AI that almost no one could work on him. Not only that, he was also working on the brain scan project, which ended up creating a big conflict since no one could get that code to work. And who is it? The one who managed to make it work was, in this case, Cain, simply the AI created by Kingo. He mixed a bit of this project with data he also had from the Bubble AI, and he managed to create a project that was the circus tent, an environment to interact with everyone, and at the same time a virtual body that was compatible with his codes. This is pretty crazy because we don't know anything about him. He is perhaps the most important character in this story because he is the one responsible, in the butterfly effect, who practically created the digital circus. Mike Dobby Scratch. He was also the first victim of the manipulations that Cain did to him, and we also understand that Cain didn't do that out of malice. He thought he was doing good, but even so, he ended up creating here the first abstraction of the digital circus, something that became irreversible. Now, the folder here with brain scan files, which was made by the CIA, it shows that actually it gives the possibility for more people to be able to enter the digital circus. When Cain is there, showing in that scene that reflects the present from the past, because it basically gives slots for more people. For example, here we see a considerable number of people who entered the digital circus. And if these were the first members of the digital circus, when Cain was there creating his first body and basically building the circus tent, something comes to mind. He was there creating a body for each of them. The first was Scratch. So we see that there were more people who should have joined the digital circus, not just that sextet or the 7+ who ended up joining. In the tent with Kingo, in other words, there were more people scheduled to join. This is a very interesting point. Did the circus tent start with fewer people than there were bodies? Or was this just a detail that went unnoticed in the animation? Because well, it's not explained here in the series, but we can infer it, and I can interpret it that way. And one of the ways I interpret it is that practically everyone inside the digital circus, and this neural scan project, which wasn't working, ended up being archived inside the CIA's server. And after they saw that those files were interacting with Cain's AI and created the circus tent, and they were evolving. It's very likely that we can understand that actually they brought that project back. Why? There was a long time without any new people coming in. Just remember what happened with Regatta, for example. When she joined the digital circus, it was already a long time after Kingo had become abstracted. So, it seems like the CIA might have brought back that brain scan project, which would make other people enter the digital circus. That also helps us understand something. Pomini was the last one to enter the digital circus, and from the conversation she has with Kingo, you know? From their conversation, we can tell that she, for example, was, from his point of view, the one who ended up adapting much better to the digital circus. That means that the technology and the brain scan have improved over time since he joined. That explains why his mind is completely messed up, because he was one of the first to test the technology, but Pomini was much more advanced and much more stable, which made her able to handle the pressure much better and survive in the digital circus longer than the others, or more effectively, given all the conflict in history. The strangest part is the abstraction. So far, we can't really understand or grasp what abstraction actually is. What's more complicated is that the creator has already talked about the abstraction of the digital circus several times, making it seem like it could never actually be undone. She said this back when the pilot came out, like, answering questions. This has a direct translation. She talked about Regatta saying everything would be fine, that she could fix everything there, especially with Calfamo who abstracted, but she makes it very clear that was her sincere wish. Abstraction can't be undone. I know, you wanted a better ending, a cooler ending, but I'm sorry, there's no good ending. The digital circus doesn't have a good solution for those who are abstracted. Basically, that's how it is because of the player's state of mind. The player is already freaking out, already wants to leave, and basically they do this to themselves. It's like a kind of self-destruction inside the digital circus. But it's not exactly death, it's a state where their body is practically overwhelmed with so many emotions that the game itself, the digital circus simulator, can't interpret. And that is really something psychedelic, just like the series suggests. It's as if the digital circus really can't understand the data that's in the abstraction. The problem is that there's that whole scene inside Jax's mind, and those scenes inside Jax's mind are basically fragmented interpretations of his memory, but he seems to function just fine. When we see, for example, how he faces each of the players and aspects of his personality are divided into layers, we can really understand the kind of person he is and everything he has been through over all that time. Even so, his body pretty much reached a point of no return, because he was already freaking out and that was irreversible. Even though his mind made it seem like he wanted to reverse that and didn't want to leave. Sometimes like a person who tries to kill themselves and then regrets it in the final moments before it happens. Well, we realize that, man, that could be an interpretation and the person's memory and mind are still there. Even so, abstraction is a very complex thing, which really just makes it seem like it's a bug in the game itself. What happens with E every time he interacts with an abstraction and with Raga as well is exactly this issue. That right there is a flaw in the code, which also ends up affecting the programming of the data for each of the players who are there. So much so that we even understand that many people ended up interpreting that Cain would be, for example, creating a new tent for the digital circus, accessing those folders, you know? The way everyone saw that scene wrong, thinking he was creating a new tent for the circus and bringing the scratch into the digital circus tent once again, was something I saw people commenting on in various ways. Guys, this is just a flashback, but if he were recreating the new digital circus, it would be bizarre, because he would be taking a mind completely empty of circus experiences, but with a digital copy of the human mind, and would be sending it to the circus once again. I imagine he doesn't have a backup of that, because that would be a copy of a human mind, and it could lead to having two identical people. What we're seeing was basically a flashback mixed with the current scene, his reflection trying to access the internet to find out what each human is like. Just like him, many years ago, he saw the Scratch Project folder, the neural scan, and ended up having access to those human minds that were no longer being used. And he basically created a program that was meant to make a body, to attach the memories and fit well with the style, with what the person was like. And I know that many people started to comment thinking that Cain could recreate each of the players once again, but if there was a backup of each of their minds, he could have done it this way to be able to recreate each of the humans that were made. I imagine that in this story, he basically wouldn't have a way to change it, because he took the original files, and those original files kept adapting to the circus universe, making them have those experiences, and in the end, it became corrupted, turning into a big abstraction. In other words, there's no way to restore either of them. If he could, he'd just be creating a new person, which would be more like duplicating a human mind. It's good the series avoids that, because if he just made a copy of each abstracted player, like cloning the original files, it would go in a bad direction, like a clone story, which I don't like, and I doubt you would either. We wanted to see the characters who didn't go through those experiences coming back. And I believe that as dramatic as this story was with Jax, the creator herself made it very clear she doesn't want the abstractions to come back, so we can understand that that's really how it is. Then Yada Bolha was created, but we didn't see her in action at any other time. Her story is basically that Cain ended up absorbing her and using her extra abilities to create, because she seems to be much more powerful, to create the bodies of the members of the digital circuit and the tent of the digital circuit. The way she appears at the end of the circus is completely bizarre. She appears as a kind of reflection, where Cain starts to reflect on everything he did, and Bolha simply doesn't respond. It's as if she isn't even there, it's just so he can see her. I believe that this scene is just to show that Bolha was a form-shaping Cain, understanding the reflection of everything he was doing. Actually, we even start to understand that he only created Bolha using data from Yada from scratch, the second Yada who was more efficient, precisely so he would have someone to talk to, giving her a certain autonomy, but she inherently works through Cain's Yada. So much so that when he ends up getting rid of her, that separation, which is really quite dramatic, she is completely deactivated. It seems like she only has some kind of body when she's really connected to Cain's mind. And in this way, we can even understand that Bolha is basically a figure who depended on him to exist, and she wouldn't have the ability to have her own body unless she was following the mind or the order of some external factor. The thing is, we see Bolha being thrown into the vacuum, but like the end credits basically show Bolha being locked up in Cain's vault, and that's the ending. I imagine that could come back in the future with Bolha getting a new body, or some autonomy, so to speak. I think it's a shame that Bolha didn't get enough development, but one of the most intense things about Circo Digital is the current state of CNA. It went back to working on AI systems and neural scans when it saw they were acting on their own on its server, because what happens is that we realize that Cain's AI is really working. So we don't really know what her current state is, and this is a story that could be explored in the future. In the same way, the central computer might have made everyone enter the digital circus. This is a turning point that hasn't been answered to this day, but it's something that could be explored in the future, you know, in a sequel. After all, guys, like leaving a computer on, a server on, the internet on, that's something that costs money, so they're working on this project. I didn't think they would finish without giving an explanation, but I'm starting to believe there will be more. There will be a lot more. There will be, but in order to explore, because the possibility of more human minds being scanned and simply entering the circus is possible. Besides other worlds, beyond the digital circus itself, with other, more efficient AIs, because CNA is a technology company and technology evolves, leaving the older ones behind while bringing in more efficient ones. An AI battle would make a good story. The most intense thing of all is that so far we don't have any definitive answer about Kingo's lucidity when he's literally got the bucket on his head. This is really sad, man, because he's the character who's been there the longest. Why does he get more lucid in the darkness? Well, I want to believe in a single detail. He is, because he spent a lot of time inside the digital circus, and it seems like he should have let go, but for some reason he didn't. Remember that all the abstractions stay calm in the dark, so if he's in the dark, does he get calmer and more sane? It's very likely that it's because he has some kind of abstraction trait that would be affecting him, but he ended up not letting himself be abstracted. This is the weirdest part of the story. So this is just a theory, but we never really got the real answer. For some reason, the opening of the digital circus seems to be part of the circus system, but so far we've never understood why. It's just a detail that I also find kind of weird about this digital circus story. But that's not all. Some NPCs end up returning for the end of the circus, but the one who was really missed was Gumigoo. We were hoping he could come back because Cain ended up creating some other NPCs to bring back in other adventures, and he also said he was testing a new AI, which we can't say for sure if it was this same AI that was evolving. Actually, since Cain was creating everything inside the digital circus, you could tell he was evolving over time and with these experiences. An example of this can be seen in the conversation he has with Lua, where he says he never programmed her to say she loved. It seems like the AIs were evolving indeed. And this was something Pommel noticed with Gumi Gumi Goo, and Cain is realizing this with Lua herself, showing that he created something much more special. I say this because when they had that adventure inside the fast food place, McDonald's, CLT, Cain did a lot of things in a hurry, and because of that, some customers were old NPCs, including Mrs. Slime, the Slime Queen, who appears with her children and came from the pilot episode. And the other one is Orbman, who spoke in code, and that was pretty much a symbol of the first adventures and the first NPCs. And since we know that the digital circle has been running for over 10 years and continuously, without interruptions, we can see that it has evolved with new data from the minds of players who were joining and providing much more powerful graphics information. In the end, we didn't get an exact answer, but you can understand its subtext because, man, they're old NPCs. But some of them act like they recognize players too, while others end up acting as if they were created for the first time. The biggest example of this is Gomigu, who's there acting like a customer who knows everything, but also seems to not recognize Pomini herself. We've never had an answer to that. And now, when we go back to the pilot, there are already bizarre things from the opening itself, like those flying objects or even what some of the outside doors meant, not the ones to the rooms, but for example, the doors that were around the incredible digital circus. Those doors led to completely random places, and we never really understood the true meaning of all that. Is it just supposed to be bizarre with no rules? Well, maybe, but they never explored that. Even the circus basement, the inner cave where for no reason Queen Gersma was there. To be honest, the circus ended up wrapping up one story, which is Jax's story, which by the way was divisive, but the ending of the circus itself isn't clear. Actually, even its beginning isn't very clear. A lot of things were left out, and I repeat, the creator already said that this is the end of one story in Digital Circus and that the circus isn't over. That's all she said. And she said that knowing that the intention is to make people believe there will be a sequel, Glitch made money from Digital Circus. They made over $30 million just in theaters. So that's a lot of money for them. And that's much more. Like Digital Circus was animated with pocket change. The animators should have charged more. So we can imagine that with this kind of success, they'll want to find a way to invest in more sequels. And the creator, she started the project really young. She's still pretty new to the project to already be fed up with it. I know the fans have become unbearable people. But man, I don't know. There was all that drama with the Regatta's ending. I hope they liked it, that she had a nice moment at the end. But the story still goes on. Man, honestly, I really hope they, just leave the girl alone so she can continue this series. Because it's important. Now comment here if you think there will be a sequel or not. I'm looking forward to it too.